Hey, welcome back to Homeschool Wherever. My name is Carmen Sognonvi, and in this video, we are going to talk about world schooling. So what is world schooling? Well, in essence, it's an educational philosophy that believes that the world is really the child's best classroom. There's a strong emphasis on learning from real-life experiences that come about through travel and exploration. A related term you may have seen is road schooling. So broadly speaking, families who do road schooling are traveling domestically within the United States, for instance, whereas families who do world schooling are traveling internationally. Now, of course, there are plenty of road schooling families who also do international trips, and there are plenty of world schooling families who will spend a good amount of time road tripping across the US. So in reality, there's a lot more overlap between these two terms than you might think. Now, what world schooling actually looks like in real life can vary a lot between families. In this video, I'm going to cover some of the main approaches that world schooling families have both towards travel and also towards learning. So that way you can see which of these resonates most with you. This video is part of a series called Homeschooling Explained. When I first started looking into homeschooling, I was really overwhelmed with all of the terminology. Deschooling, unschooling, Charlotte Mason, morning baskets. I'm sure I'm not the only one, so I decided to start this series to help demystify some of the language around homeschooling. I'm going to link down below to the playlist that has the rest of the series in case you'd like to check that out. If you're new to this channel, we are a secular multiracial family who lives in New York City, and we're homeschooling for the first time this year. We have two daughters, Sean, who's in 6th grade, and Ella, who's in 3rd grade. We're really passionate about using travel to bring our homeschooling lessons to life. This channel is all about documenting our homeschooling journey, so if that sounds of interest to you, I hope you'll subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next video. Also, we are full-time family travel creators, so if you'd like to see that side of our lives, check out our travel channel at Top Flight Family. So the person who claims to have coined the term world schooling is a young man by the name of Eli Gerzon. He's originally from Boston, and he went to traditional school until the age of 15. At that point, he decided to switch to homeschooling. At age 18, he began traveling the world, and that is what inspired the idea of world schooling. Eli's outlook can be summarized in this quote of his, which is, "The whole world is our school. School isn't our whole world." So what does world schooling look like in practice? Well, it can vary. There are a variety of approaches to both the travel side of things and the learning side of things. So let's talk about the travel side first. There's a few main ways in which families approach the travel piece of world schooling. The first type of family I would consider to be full-time nomads who do long-term stays. So these families will spend weeks or even months in a single place. They really get to know the country and the people and the culture, and instead of living out of their suitcase or staying in hotel rooms, they may actually lease an apartment or a house and actually stay there for quite a while. So these families tend to put down roots to some extent, and they may be pretty involved in their community that they live in. The second approach to travel is what I would call full-time nomads, short-term stays. So just like the previous example, these families are also traveling full-time. However, they may only be spending a few days or a couple weeks at each destination, and the goal is not so much the depth of experience, it's more about experiencing a wide variety of destinations. And it should be noted that most world schooling families probably do a little bit of both. They probably do some short-term stays and some longer-term stays. So again, there's overlap. These are not necessarily distinct categories. A third approach to travel is what I would call occasional travel. And I suppose you could say that our family more or less falls into this box. So these are families that have a home in their home country, so that's their home base. However, they do occasional, or in our case, frequent travel outside of that. And then there's a fourth category, which kind of sort of falls into world schooling, but it really depends on your opinion or your perspective. And that is the type of family that are expats. And by expat, I mean a family that lives permanently in another country. So my dad, for instance, was an expat. He was from Belgium, but he spent most of his life working and living in Hong Kong. So there is some correlation between world schoolers and expats, but they're not always exactly kind of the same. Expats, for example, will often send their kids to regular traditional schools. They don't necessarily homeschool their kids. However, the learning through travel may be very much part of their lifestyle. But of course, it all depends on the family. Now, at this point, you may be wondering, is it possible to be a world schooler and not do any travel? And the answer is Kinda, sorta. There are some families who consider themselves world schoolers even though they don't really travel that much. However, they do follow the philosophy of using the world as their classroom. So for example, they may put a lot of emphasis on learning from real-world experiences. So rather than actually traveling abroad to learn about a new culture, for instance, they may utilize some of the resources in their hometown. Like for example, going to different ethnic neighborhoods like a Chinatown or a Little India to learn about those different foods and different cultures. Now, we've talked about the different approaches to travel. Now let's talk about the different approaches to learning among world schooling families. So first, there are what I would consider traditional homeschooling families. In other words, even though they're traveling all the time, they are bringing their books with them. They are probably using some kind of curriculum, some kind of books, and teaching out of that. Another approach to learning among world schooling families, and this one I think is very common, is to use the unschooling approach. If you want to learn more about unschooling and all of the different types of unschooling approaches there are, I'm going to link down below to the video that I made all about unschooling. But in essence, unschooling is all about child-led learning. So families who unschool most likely may not be teaching out of a curriculum. They may not necessarily even be using any books at all. The emphasis is much more about what the child is learning through their environment, through traveling. Now, another approach to learning for world schooling families is that some families will actually enroll their kids in the local school of whatever country they're in at that time. And this may seem counterintuitive because homeschooling is all about not doing traditional school, but I think a lot of world schooling families see that as kind of a short-term experience for the kids. So again, they can learn what it's like for regular kids in that country to go to a regular school. They get to play with other kids. They get to learn the things that kids of that country are learning. So it doesn't necessarily mean that these families are all about the traditional school model. That just becomes yet another real-life experience that their kids can learn from. Okay, if you want to learn all about unschooling, check out that video right there. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Homeschool Wherever. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.